Hey, hi guys, good evening and welcome. Welcome to this podcast on addressing and understanding the talent challenges that we have in the information security space. So I'm super thrilled and delighted. I have two wonderful guests who are joining us today. One is Pak Razdi Rashim, who is the Chief Security Officer for a leading global telco in this region. And I have B. Srinivas, who is the Senior Director Solutions with Nokia Software APJ. And together, three of us will discuss the challenges associated with talent, how companies are overcoming it, what are the best practices, and what are some tips for people who are looking at building careers in security. So, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Manoj. Thanks for having me in.
Hi, hello.
Excellent. So we thought, we'll keep this as a very casual conversation, talk about the challenges. And we did lots of research. Research really points out to a huge gap that exists, and estimates for the global talent gap for security ranges between 2 million people to 4 million people over the next 3 years or 4 years time frame. It is undeniable the challenge that we will face as organizations, especially as we are becoming more and more digital. And today's COVID-19 situation pushes all to work remotely. There is more digital penetration going to happen, and challenges are going to increase. So let's first understand what specifically are the challenges that you face.
Well, the challenge especially from my perspective, would be finding the right guy, the right person to fill up the position. Because based on the organization, you have certain area of security. If you're talking information security, there will be a combination about technical governance, and then some of area involving security operations. So if you're aware that the range of the people that will be required from the GRC and the technical security, and then the security operation will be quite fast. And then some of the area, especially like security operation, mostly populated by consultant or engineer or the analyst that who prefer working with consultants because they have some freedom to deep dive into the knowledge what they find best, which is in terms of end user perspective, more like a security operation BAU.
Business as usual.
Yeah, so business as usual. That also happens on the area involving the technical aspect. The security engineer, security architect, much more be challenged if you throw them about the use case related to how to solve the problem instead how to solve within the corporate. Yeah, because the complexity of the security within organization depends on the area, and it depends on how they embrace the technology, and then how big is the support from management. So it's quite difficult to find more generalists in terms of security professional, but in some layers you need to have deep dive specialists to do the job or to do the functions.
So you have both those challenges. You don't have enough generalists who understand the business, and you don't have sometimes specialists who can go deep enough from a technology perspective as well. Srini, you want to comment on this issue and challenge?
Yeah, certainly. I think Parasvi has hit the nail on the head by saying there is a gap with regard to the technical skills as well as the general skills. But I would like to take the problem a step further, and I will say today what we really lack is actually not just the resources that would actually serve us for today, but we also have a problem for tomorrow. You alluded to the shortage of 2 to 4 million professionals. Now, what is the community, what is the ecosystem really doing to actually prepare us for tomorrow's challenges or tomorrow's talent gap is where my biggest concern is. Today, there aren't enough educational institutions that are actually focusing on security as a profession. Point number one. Point number two, repeatedly, we are actually failing to attract the right level of talent into the security profession. And that goes across the technology as well as the general aspect which Parusdi talked about, right? So these are the two big challenges that we actually are confronted with today. And that's something which is going to have a huge impact on tomorrow. Unless these two are addressed in a very systematic and a structured way, it's going to be really difficult for us to address this problem in a holistic manner.
Got it. How about soft skills? Sometimes you have people in technology or security who understand technology extremely well, but then a large part of security is dealing with teams, is to define and drive processes and change management within a company. Is that a big enough issue, or is not that big an issue?
So I believe soft skills are certainly very important, and I think diversity is again one of the most important aspects that will have an impact on the way security is actually being perceived and security is actually working. Parasdeep talked about the technical skills, which are going deep into specific aspects, whether it is penetration testing, work security operations. But then you need somebody to really define the policies, the procedures, and the frameworks. And then you need to actually make sure that you drive this top down. For somebody to do that, they need to essentially possess the right skills to drive the change within the organization. And that's where soft skills become extremely important and extremely relevant. Today, I would say there are enough ways to actually prepare the raw material into a finished product with regard to the soft skills. The only thing is, because there are not many people who are actually looking at security as a profession, you are really not getting the right talent which would take up security as a profession. And that's where there is a gap in the overall skills, not just the soft skills, I would say.
Got it.
For me, it's more like security people has to be some kind of bridging because the technical aspect will not going to be understood easily by the business owner. But in terms of the soft skill, you require to have some experience and then some area regarding what are the benefits, what are the risks, what are the costs to achieve that one. So it requires the people to see it's not just from the technical aspect, but also what kind of organization you are into or what kind of organization you are sold to. It's not what you say is difficult, but when you're talking about security, starting with the technical and then move up to explaining about non-technical, that's a challenge.
Yeah. In fact, Manoj, Parasdeep actually pointed out a very important point. Explaining technology to the business users is something which is extremely important. But this problem becomes a lot more pronounced in case of security because security as a technology is not understood by many business executives. They've always left security as an afterthought. It's only now, especially in this world of the new digital era, organizations are realizing the importance of integrating security straight into the business. So I think the skills that are really required to actually explain the importance and the intricacies of security to business and to be able to drive business to take decisions in such a way that your ecosystem is secured, yet you are obtaining the business results that you want. And that is something which Parasdeep summarized it very well, I would say.
You cannot keep it from only one side. You have to approach it from the other side also. The management has to see this is the benefit from security. Otherwise, we cannot be halfway. And then when talking about security, they tend to see security as IT security. You're talking about IT, hey, this one is talking about technology, right? You're not talking about information security. You're probably talking about IT security.
I think it's a phenomenal point. If you ask most people, they will refer to it as IT security or they may refer to it as cyber security, but we really have to think about information security.
And then also one more point. Today, CISOs just report to either the CTO or the CIO, right? Now, how many organizations have really identified security as an important function and have actually exposed them directly to the CEOs? The importance that organization really attaches to security is evident from the reporting line that CISO has for within the organization. If they are actually working, let's say, with the likes of CTO and CIO, then the organization is still thinking about security as an afterthought. But if the organization is really trying to integrate security into the mainstream, then the CISO is actually reporting to the Chief Operations Officer or in some cases to the Chief Executive Officer. And that's the kind of importance that many organizations are today thinking of attaching to security.
So, you have built so many security teams for multiple organizations now. What is the typical composition of a team?
So, based on my experience, if you have a full-blown, let's say we started from IT security. On IT security, we're talking about the development and then operations. Development tends to be in the technology area, means either you have your own security initiative, implementing security technology, and then you operate. And then we're talking about the security operation, about certain technology parts. But in facial connection, when the coverage on the information security, and then you have some of the area regarding the governance, risk and compliance. Means you're not just seeing from the technology perspective. You are seeing from the business process and how to manage the risk from the business process itself. That requires another security RC. They are addressing most of the people and the process area related to security. And then we have related to the security architecture and development for the infrastructure, for the technology. That's usually work together with the IT and then, of course, the operation.
I would like to abstract this to a slightly higher level. A security team should focus on three specific areas: thinking, doing, and communicating. Now, the thinking team, and Parusji has covered it all. Thinking is actually the team which is establishing the processes and the frameworks. The governance, risk, and compliance teams that Parusji talked about pretty much comes there. Doing is all a network compliance team, the team that drives the compliance, the team that drives the security operations, the team that focuses on network security, the team that implements different kinds of tools to actually drive security. But the third aspect, which is extremely important, is the team that communicates. The team that communicates both with the internal as well as the external stakeholders. Parusji actually talked about this communication with business. I think that's something which we need to really look at. And Manoj, you alluded to soft skills. So the communicating team is very, very essential. That becomes the most important team to actually go and communicate with multiple internal stakeholders. Now, the last point, which many organizations have now started to focus on, be it telcos or be it the new age companies like the Facebooks and the Googles of the world, they are actually having people who could actually communicate with the policymakers. For example, a telco, which is actually providing the critical infrastructure, should essentially have ways and means to communicate with the government and make sure that the influence is happening both ways. One, the telco is able to influence the government policies. At the same time, you are able to translate the government policies, understand them ahead of time, come and implement them within your system. So that communication part is extremely important. So this is what I would say are the three categories on how you could build an organization in security.
I agree with Pak Srini. We set up a policy, we're planning and implement the security. There has to be some way to communicate the security requirements. So that's one of the important things. We have the security requirements once we engage with the internal on the external stakeholders. So those positions is getting more and more increasing, especially if you look at from the e-commerce, from the banking position, especially they have multiple divisions. On the telco part where they have a B2B division. So if you engage, we always took, in terms of security, we always see when we are talking about the security requirement to put as a project, because either we are implementing the security requirements or we are getting being advisor of the security requirements. So either way, from my experience, getting be positioned as a advising the security requirement to business is getting more, because they always look at you from the go guy. Hey, Steve, I have this engagement. What do you think from the data security? What do you think? Is there anything I need to concern about the security GRC? So if you can say that I bold and I underline it and I italic, those reflected on the sum of roles. If you look at there are some banking position that put, or some area that put the business information security officer that specifically address that one.
Correct. Is there someone dedicated for internal communication also, or is it somebody who is already in the team has to take on the responsibility?
There are some organizations that have a privilege to have quite many resources that can become someone to discuss the requirements of business. In terms of the team is not big enough. Usually, the one who's facing with for example, me and my one down will be the person to go to have a requirements, to have a discussion with it. And then we recap all the requirements and we talk. And then some area and some business, they have a certain role that specifically only listen and talk and advise the business on how to achieve the security requirements, either internally or externally, or even from the government perspective.
Okay, very nice. Now, let's say, if you're starting fresh, how do you go about building a security team from fresh? Say you were hired tomorrow as the chief security officer of a firm. Where would you start? In a nutshell, how would you go about building that team?
Okay, first, you can see how important the security aspect from the structure organization itself. As Srini mentioned about There are some security roles that reported to the CTIO or even from the IT department. They are reporting to CEO and CEO. So for me, the direct reporting will be represent the management, the senior management component of how they are going to put security as the part of the component within to achieve the business. Yeah, for me, currently I reported directly to CEO. So all the information security requirements will be communicated to him. And then we have a regular meeting to discuss it. And then, to be honest, this is my first time experience that I can discuss freely with the CEO and how his vision, his requirements regarding that. It's quite thrilling to see the aspect. And then on the other hand, I'm part of the IT operation, and we report to the head of IT operation. It's a different KPI. The KPI is
keep it safe.
Maintaining the operations. Availability first, and then later on will be security. It's not just I'm not saying it's bad, but you have to look at security in terms of supporting the operation KPI rather than to see it from there. So we have some limitation, we have some requirements.
Are more and more companies having this kind of a dual reporting? Is that a way to, let's say, because you have limited budgets, so you cannot have too expensive roles. So is that hybrid way many companies are looking at it?
More and more. When you talk about security, there will be about more than 70%, even more about 80% of technical. So you have to have a dotted line, either to have technology or CTIO, for example, or the CIO itself. Because security is quite sexy to discuss, quite expensive to implement, and it's really hard to make it consistent to operate. So the aspect of technology have to be discussed with other, let's say the highest will be the CIO, the CTIO, or the CTO. The other one would be related to how to align with the business requirements. So talking about how to set up, first look at the role to which I'm reporting to, and then how you're going to cover it. Is it going to be corporate-wide? Some organization has such what you call a subsidiary company. Is it going to be covered as subsidiary company? So starting that one. And then later on will be what kind of structure organization, if you're talking about telco, there will be IT component and the telco component. If it's banking, more likely into the IT and operations. And then we have to look at our internal talents. Who is already there? I mean, say the security guys is not necessary who call the title is at the IT security. Probably some system administrator is quite capable. Probably some DevOps engineer. Probably more into the applications developer. So we have to look at internal talent for that one. And then the requirements have to be break it down into some of the roles. The structure organization has to be fulfilled. There will be some reference to set up the organizations, and then some job description, and then you find the talents.
Good.
For me, internal talents will be very much important talents to how to look this up. And then if we cannot fulfill it internally, and then we hire externally.
Got it. Excellent. Srini, you want to add to it?
Yes. I think I go back to the same TDC fractal, which is thinking, doing, and communication. And Parusji has covered a gamut of things. So there are only a couple of things I would like to add, not repeat what he just said. The first one is build versus buy. What do we really build within your organization? What can you really buy, which is essentially the outsourcing aspect in the organization. I would say the thinking and communicating have to be essentially part of the parent organization. That's very, very clear. You cannot really, CISO as a service or outsourcing CISO will not work for organizations. That's my view. There are different perspectives, but that's my view.
Agree, because the knowledge of the organization, it has to be owned by someone within the organization.
Correct. So that's exactly. So the thinking and the communication part has to be a part of the organization, and there is no option but for organizations to build this capability. The doing is where organizations can really take advantage of the new techniques like as a service model, outsourcing it completely, then outcome-based models and whatnot, right? So all of that experimentation and all of the unique business model that the world talks about today can pretty much be exploited within the doing part. That's where I would like to add.
Excellent. So, Paragaraji, you briefly talked about when you look at building the teams, obviously there is one way you look internally, and if you don't have enough from internal, then you go out and you look outside. right? So when you look outside, do you hire a lot of people fresh from colleges? How do you go about? Do you have a management training program? Like, businesses always have management training programs to build the next level of leadership. Are you looking at curating pool of talent, given that there is such a big shortage of talent?
That one will require to have a discussion first with the HR, how we are going to address the resources out, because HR, I think, more and more develop on how to achieve, because the digital transformation require them to much more agile to recruit some resource. So my response will be to talk with HR how to achieve this one.
Do you also, for example, go out and get people from HR, from finance, or from audit and say, hey guys, why don't you, we have so many diversity of roles. Have you been successful in doing that? Attracting people from other divisions to security, because they understand the company, they understand the processes, and maybe they will become better stakeholders to drive this.
Yeah, becoming a security person is not easy, because everything related to security, right? If you talk to the regulator and then you talk about security, if you're talking about even on the antivirus itself, on the malware, you talk about security. On the hacking, security. So even though it's quite sexy to be discussed, but not everyone wants to have what you call a wide range of coverage, and then some area that is not quite comfortable for them. For example, the network people or the IP network people, they have their own comfort zone to talk about IP network there. But when you talk about firewall, they know some about this one, but they talking about blocking this one and then how to DDoS. Yeah, it's quite different. I mean,
but it's good to say as a strategy, difficult to implement.
It's good. I mean, we have condition that we can attract people from the developers and there's some from the audits itself. But you have to be active. That's the communicate area that we need to convey to the internal stakeholders.
Got it.
Yeah, I think a couple of points that I wanted to add. The first one is, recently when I was in the RSA USA, I had the opportunity of attending one of the presentations by Women in Security. And they actually brought up a very important point. They said, folks, the number of women who are part of the security teams in any of these roles is very limited today. So I think bringing in the right level of diversity in terms of not just women, right? Cultural diversity, I think that's extremely, extremely important. The second aspect, which is very, very important, which we don't consider, is security is not just a technology issue. It's about people, process, and technology, all three put together. So why not experiment with some people? And I was actually listening to a few case studies where there were a few people who took a leave of absence from work because of family and personal reasons for 10 years. And have actually come back into the organizations as security professionals, looking into the process and the people areas. So that's something which is pretty much in vogue within the world right now. And I think this is being recommended by many security organizations as well. And the third thing, and I think the security community as a whole, which includes people like me, Parusdi, and everybody, I think we are guilty of the fact that we don't really show security in a good light. We are actually failing to attract the right talent into security. We don't really market the importance of security and the career paths that you could have if you were to actually take up security as a profession. I think we've not been doing that. It's high time that we do it. We explain to the newer generations as to what are the advantages that could accrue to them if they were to actually take up security as a profession. And I think this is something which needs to be done at a larger scale. It's not just my or Parusdi's problem. I think everybody needs to do that. Somehow it's not happening.
Pak Srini, you know that the increasing of the security community within the country, especially Indonesia. We have, to be honest, prior to my corporate right now, I was an active sponsor for the security community, security community within Indonesia. So that's one of the action that can attract the talents, provide them with the awareness regarding what are the security in terms of career and opportunities to in a certain area, in a certain organizations, and then try to look at the security from the different aspect, because if you're talking about the community meetup, they are a technology person, they will be a GRC person, and probably an operation person. You will be very surprised how much interest on every community meetup, and then the questions related to that. And usually the question how we can start it, the security area. So I think that's good opportunity. It's not just to be used by external, but also to invite internal stakeholders. Hey, this is a community. We talk about security, and then if you need to deep dive it in, we can have a much more some kind of workshop discussion.
Yeah, and in fact, that's very country-specific thing, Parasdeep. In fact, if you look at Indonesia, which is one of the most progressive countries, I would say, in ASEAN, there's a lot of focus on security. Same is the case with Singapore as well, I would say. But then take some of the countries, I think not many people actually take up security as a profession. So spot on with your comment, and I think you touched upon a very important aspect of community. But I think it's still nascent stages, and it's still taking baby steps, I would say.
In terms of certifications, what do you look for today, and what do you recommend as the next steps for people who are looking at building careers? What are the certifications that are exciting to people like you who are building security teams? What recommendations do you have? You have one of the highest number of certifications that many people have in security in this region, right?
Well, there are quite many people that has a certification. I think there are some, if you look at the security certification, you will have much more into the general, so more into the management perspective, and then much more conceptual in terms of information security. And the other part of the certifications related to the specialist, deep dive into either the technology area or the hacking area or whatever area which is technical. So it's a good start to start with the technical, because if you're talking about security, you need to have a hands-on on the technical part first, because security is 70 plus, for me, 70 plus technical. So you have to have a good grasp on the technical. Some start from the systems, some start from the network perspective. The other one starts from the application nowadays. So you can, for the people who is going to start on the security career path, you can look at on the technical certifications from vendor or up until to much more agnostic. There are some options to do that. And then when you have enough technical knowledge and you have experience, and you have options, either you go deep dive into the technical area, become an expert yourself, or you can put yourself as a management part, when it's not just doing, but communicate, as Pak Srini mentioned, communicate and think about the security yourself.
I think I concur with Parusji on the approach. I also believe that 60 to 70% of security, you got to be technically strong. So that's why I recommend the CISSP as the first level of certification. If you are very serious about, let's say, cloud security, if that's the area you're talking about, I would recommend the CCSP, which is the Cloud Security Professional from ISC Square. But I think that should be the foundational certification. Then you can add on to the certifications depending on the path that you want to take. If you want to take, let's say, governance risk compliance, you've got ISACA certifications like the CISM, Certified Information Security Manager, or Certified Information Security Auditor. These are some of the certifications you can certainly take. If you want to drive the implementation part, if you want to focus more on execution, then you could even take vendor certification. For example, the likes of F5, Palo Alto, Cisco, they offer things like CCNA, F5 certifications, Palo Alto certifications. So you could even take those. You could even take the security certifications from the likes of Azure and Amazon, all these players. You could even do that. That's on the doing part. And then if you want to still focus on specific areas or focus on aspects like ethical hacking and all that, you could take these certifications like Certified Ethical Hacker and all these things. But all of this depends on the path that you really want to take in your career and how you want to shape your own career. Basis and the foundation, according to me, would certainly be the likes of CISSP and CCSP if you were to really focus on that.
So if you look into the future, let's say if you, as we get to conclude this conversation, as a chief security officer, what are the challenges that you see moving ahead? Both in terms of talent, in terms of overall capabilities that you need to build. Is there anything you think we should emphasize more?
For me, having a good talent is not an easy one, but to retain to retain a good security person will be much harder rather than get it. So if you already have the security person that's already fit in within your organization, have the capability to deliver and be able to think and communicate with the stakeholders, and you have to retain it. There's some strategy to retain the person. You can develop it according to his or her passions, or you can just challenge it based on her or his wish also. So I think one of the things will be how to retain the good security person becomes much more beneficial for the organization itself.
I would like to add one part here. I think, yes, retention is certainly important, but I would say the biggest challenge that people like Paruzdi are faced with is to keep the capabilities and the knowledge current. Basically, to continuously enrich the capabilities of team members is going to be the biggest challenge of a CISO for tomorrow, because the threat vectors are changing at a rapid way. The technology shift is happening in a big way. So it doesn't matter if you achieve a certification today. How are you keeping abreast with the latest technological changes, latest set of vulnerabilities, latest set of threat vectors, and make sure that your capabilities are not becoming obsolete? The biggest issue with security is people have to work really hard for them to keep up with the current knowledge, right? And that's going to become a big challenge for people like Paruzdi who are in this field and who are managing teams as a CISO. And I think that needs to be really addressed. Motivating the people to keep abreast with the technology changes is what I would say is the biggest challenge.
Before we wrap up, any best practices that you have seen relating to talent?
For me, it's quite a interesting approach when you are put a specific role, but you are expecting that role to be expanded on the. So I believe there will be some challenge on how to fulfill because of the number of people itself. But making a security role, the job itself will be quite appealing to that. Will be attractive.
Fantastic, great example. So thank you very much. I think this is such a great conversation. I'm sure we learned a wide range of issues associated with talent. Thank you very much, Paruzdi. Thank you very much,
Thank
Srini.
you. Thank you
for your time.
You.
Cheers.